Chapter 1. The Lavish Party and the Mysterious Woman. The Lancaster estate stood in the midst of a snow-covered oak forest on the outskirts of London, a solitary castle against the bitter winter night. A December wind whispered through the towering glass windows, its icy breath making the crimson velvet curtains quiver ever so slightly in the grand ballroom. Inside, the glow of hundreds of crystal chandeliers shimmered like scattered jewels, casting their light upon the polished marble floor, which reflected the silhouettes of society's elite. The crisp clinking of glasses mingled with refined laughter, hushed whispers filled with hidden intentions, and the intoxicating aroma of fine wine and expensive perfume. Tonight they had all gathered to celebrate Vincent Lancaster, the man who had just sealed a multi-billion-dollar financial deal, elevating Lancaster Group to new heights in the global economy. Vincent Lancaster, 35, stood at the heart of the room, a living embodiment of power and perfection. His jet black hair was slicked back neatly, revealing a high forehead and thick, commanding brows. His deep blue eyes, cold as ice, glimmered with intelligence and danger, making anyone who met his gaze instinctively wary. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that hugged his tall, chiseled frame, exuding an air of both allure and detachment. In his hand, a glass of red wine swirled, its deep crimson hue catching the chandelier's light, resembling fresh blood, a fitting image for a man who controlled everything within his grasp. He did not smile, yet the faint curve at the corner of his lips exuded confidence, as if the entire world was a chessboard upon which he had already secured victory. Vincent lived in solitude, encasing his heart behind an impenetrable wall, allowing no one to breach his defenses. His life was one of absolute control over wealth, people, and even his own emotions. No one dared to cross the boundaries he set, and he took pride in that. Amidst the shimmering gowns and calculated pleasantries, a pair of keen eyes watched from the shadows. Hannah Blake, 28, stood by the serving table, a silver tray in her hands, blending into the grandeur like a phantom. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a tight bun, exposing a delicate but unremarkable face, one that could easily be overlooked among the extravagantly adorned women in the room. Yet her deep brown eyes held a quiet resolve and a buried pain, burning like an ember beneath the surface. The fitted black uniform clung to her slender frame, allowing her to disappear into the crowd of servers. But Hannah was no ordinary waitress. She was an undercover investigative journalist. For 10 years, she had lived under false identities, hunting the Dominion, the organization responsible for the brutal murder of her parents and younger brother on a fateful rainy night when she was just 18. Tonight, she was not here to pour drinks or bow before the wealthy. She was here for answers. Moving silently through the crowd, Hannah walked with the grace of a predator, her fingers gripping the tray so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had learned to stay invisible, to observe without being seen. Her palms were damp despite the room's cool temperature, partly from tension, partly from the memories that haunted her whenever she neared her target. She scanned each face carefully, politicians with their practiced smiles, businessmen with eyes sharp with ambition, women adorned in glittering jewels as if their worth depended on them. She memorized every detail, every movement, just as she had for the past decade, surviving through patience and vigilance. Then she saw him. Her breath hitched. A man in a waiter's uniform, nameless, unfamiliar. He moved toward Vincent with a stiffness that was unnatural, his focus unnervingly sharp compared to the usual idle servers. Bending down under the guise of wiping the table beside Vincent, he moved with swift precision, his fingers discreetly tipping a small vial into Vincent's glass. The act was nearly imperceptible, and then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone, vanishing into the crowd like a ghost. Hannah's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She recognized that liquid. It wasn't a sedative. It wasn't a petty prank. It was poison, a signature of the Dominion. She had read about it in classified documents, ones she had risked everything to uncover over the years. A colorless, odorless toxin capable of killing within 10 minutes, leaving behind almost no trace. She had seen it in her father's autopsy report, smelled the stench of death in her nightmares. And now it was in Vincent Lancaster's glass. Vincent, unaware of the silent execution awaiting him, raised his glass, preparing to deliver his speech. The room fell into expectant silence. The light from the chandeliers gleamed through the wine, illuminating its rich, swirling red. But to Hannah, it was no longer wine. It was death. She had no time to think. If Vincent drank it, he would become yet another victim of the Dominion. Her hands trembled, the tray in her grasp tilting precariously. But her gaze never wavered from him. One thought consumed her mind. She had to stop him, no matter what it took. Chapter 2. The Kiss That Changed Everything. The chandeliers above the Lancaster Estate ballroom cast dazzling light across the marble floor, reflecting the poised figures of hundreds of guests, all frozen in anticipation. The haunting melody of the violins seemed distant now, fading beneath the suffocating silence as Vincent Lancaster raised his glass of red wine to his chest, preparing to speak. The crowd held its breath, their eyes locked on the most powerful man in the room. The wine in his hands shimmered under the light, its deep crimson hue an invitation to death. An invitation that only Hannah Blake recognized. Her hands trembled, the silver tray tilting slightly in her grasp, but her gaze remained fixed on Vincent, the man she did not know, yet who now held the last key to her hunt for the Dominion. There was no time to think. If he drank from that glass, another life would be lost to them. Another tragedy would repeat itself. Hannah took a deep, shaky breath, the cold air of the ballroom biting at her lungs. With quiet determination, she set the tray down on a nearby table. The faint clink of metal against wood rang clear, a sharp, foreboding note before the storm. The guests were too captivated by Vincent, too absorbed in his presence to notice the shift in her demeanor. But in Hannah's mind, time slowed. She saw everything in perfect detail, the way the crystal light refracted through the glass, the way Vincent's long fingers held the stem, the way his lips parted ever so slightly as he prepared to take a sip. She could not let it happen. With reckless resolve, she lunged forward, her heartbeat racing faster than her footsteps. "Mr. Lancaster!" Her voice rang sharp through the air, slicing through the stillness like a blade. The entire room turned to look at her, an anonymous server daring to interrupt Vincent Lancaster's moment. He paused, the glass hovering just before his lips, his piercing blue eyes snapping to hers like a sharpened dagger. But Hannah did not stop. She feigned a stumble, her foot slipping against the polished marble, and in the chaos, she crashed into him. Her hands landed on his shoulders to steady herself, and then, without a second thought, without any other way to stop him, she tilted forward, her lips pressed against his. The world came to a standstill. The glass slipped from Vincent's grasp, crashing to the floor, shards scattering across the marble as red wine spilled like blood, staining his expensive leather shoes and soaking the hem of her black uniform. The entire ballroom gasped. The hushed whispers erupted like a tidal wave. "Who is she? What just happened?" Cameras flashed from the corners of the room, capturing the impossible. Vincent Lancaster kissed by a mere waitress. Some guests chuckled, thinking it was some extravagant joke, but most were too stunned to react. Vincent's body stiffened. His striking blue eyes widened in rare surprise. His lips, cool and unmoving beneath hers, carried the faint taste of red wine and expensive sandalwood cologne. But his reflexes were razor sharp. In an instant, his strong hands gripped her waist, holding her in place as though this was all part of an elaborate act. He didn't push her away. Instead, he leaned in just slightly, his breath warm against her cheek as he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was so quiet that only she could hear it, yet the weight of it sent a shiver down her spine. Hannah's fingers tightened against his jacket. Her breath was uneven as she whispered back, her voice urgent but steady. "The wine was poisoned. Someone is trying to kill you." Her words were simple, but they carried a gravity that left no room for doubt. She pulled back slightly, her face flushed from both the adrenaline and the audacity of what she had just done. The weight of Vincent's hand still lingered at her waist, his grip firm, unyielding. For a moment she thought he might not let her go. Vincent stared at her, his icy gaze shifting, no longer just cold calculation, but something else, a flicker of suspicion, of intrigue, and beneath it, something even more unsettling. Curiosity. He could sense the truth in her voice, the conviction in her gaze. She was no ordinary server. She had risked everything to stop him. And for the first time in a long time, Vincent Lancaster found himself captivated. He lingered just a second too long, his fingers pressing slightly against her waist before he finally released her. But his voice when he spoke was still laced with command. "You owe me an explanation, and I don't like waiting." Hannah let out a slow breath, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles, despite the chaos surrounding them. She met his gaze with defiance, a challenge flickering in her brown eyes. "Then don't waste time talking. Let me go." There was something almost playful in her tone, like she was daring him to make the next move in a game neither of them had realized they were playing. But Vincent saw something else in her eyes too, a hidden fire, a buried pain, a sincerity that was impossible to ignore. The crowd was still buzzing in shock. Some whispered with scandalous delight, others with sharp disapproval. But in the center of it all, a spark had been lit, an unexpected collision between two people who had spent their lives in the shadows. Vincent finally let go of her, his fingers leaving behind a ghost of warmth against her waist. His voice dropped into a calm, unreadable murmur as he addressed his right-hand man without taking his eyes off her. "Lucas, get that glass tested." Lucas, ever efficient, nodded sharply and moved to collect the shattered remains of the wine glass, disappearing into the background. And then under the glittering chandeliers, Vincent and Hannah stood facing each other, one a man who thrived on control, the other a woman who lived for vengeance. Neither of them knew it yet, but the kiss that saved Vincent's life had also set something irreversible into motion. A door had been opened between them, between the darkness of revenge and the fragile light of something neither of them dared to name. Chapter 3. Secrets Under the Dim Light. The heavy wooden door shut behind Vincent and Hannah with a sharp click, cutting off the chaotic noise of the Lancaster Estates ballroom. The small enclosed room they stepped into was eerily silent, a world apart from the lavish celebration outside. A single antique wall sconce cast a dim amber glow, its flickering light dancing over the vintage floral wallpaper. Against the corner stood a polished oak table, dust-covered leather-bound books resting upon it. The air carried a faint trace of sandalwood from Vincent's black suit, mingling with the crisp bite of the winter wind slipping through a narrow window crack. Hannah stood in the center of the room, her breath still unsteady from her bold action. Her fingers clenched the hem of her black uniform, the tremble in her hands betraying the storm raging inside her. Old wounds threatened to resurface, memories she had buried, yet which clawed their way back with brutal force. Vincent released her and took a step back, arms crossing over his chest as his piercing blue eyes locked onto her. Cold, calculating, his sharp features, chiseled by both privilege and power, were accentuated by the dim light, the shadows deepening the dangerous edge he carried like a second skin. His voice was low and laced with steel when he finally spoke. "Who are you?" It was not just a question, it was a demand. The tone of a man who did not tolerate ambiguity, who refused to let anything slip from his control. Hannah drew in a slow, measured breath, forcing herself to steady her heartbeat. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without hesitation, despite the way his scrutiny made her feel as if he could see straight through her. "I'm Hannah Blake," she answered, her voice firm despite its quiet volume. 10 years ago, the Dominion, a secret organization, murdered my family, my parents, my little brother. They were all taken from me." Her voice faltered for the briefest moment, but she refused to let the pain break her. "The police ruled it unsolved. No evidence, no suspects, just gone. I was the only survivor, and ever since that night, I've dedicated my life to hunting them down, to finding the proof that will bring them down." Silence filled the space between them. Vincent's gaze never wavered, yet the frost in his eyes shifted, just slightly. Hannah inhaled sharply, steeling herself against the memories pressing against her ribs like a vice. "And tonight, I discovered that you're their next target. If I hadn't stopped you, you'd be dead right now." For the first time, Vincent said nothing. He simply stared at her. For a man accustomed to deception and manipulation, he could recognize lies instantly. Yet there was none in her words. She wasn't a con artist, nor was she here for money or power. She was telling the truth. Before he could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Lucas stepped in, his expression composed but serious. In his hand was a slip of paper. "The wine was tested, sir. Neurotoxin, fast-acting, lethal within 10 minutes. A breath of tension rippled through the air. Lucas left as quickly as he had entered, the weight of his report lingering behind. Vincent turned back to Hannah. For the first time in years, something in his chest tightened. Not fear, not anger, but something else. She had saved his life, and she had done it with a reckless, self-sacrificing desperation that he couldn't understand. He stepped closer, his voice quieter now, more deliberate. "You saved me." His words weren't just gratitude. They were an admission, a fracture in the unbreakable control he held over his life. Hannah met his gaze without flinching. "I told you, the Dominion won't stop. They failed tonight, but they'll try again. And next time, they won't make mistakes." A tense pause filled the room. Then with quiet conviction, she took a step forward. The space between them shrank until she could feel the faint warmth of his breath against her skin. "I don't need your gratitude, Vincent. I need your cooperation. We have the same enemy. Help me take them down." Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow, means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Chapter 4. An Alliance Forged by Vengeance and Fate. The secluded room deep within Lancaster Estate lay hidden behind cold marble corridors, isolated from the extravagant chaos of the grand ballroom below. The dim amber glow from an old wall sconce flickered against vintage floral wallpaper, casting a warm yet stifling atmosphere, like a fortress amid a brewing storm. A polished oak table stood against the wall, its surface coated in a thin layer of dust, littered with scattered leather-bound books. The air carried a faint trace of sandalwood from Vincent Lancaster's black suit, blending with the winter chill seeping through the window's narrow cracks. Hannah Blake stood near the table, her hands no longer gripping the hem of her black uniform. The weight of her revelation still hung between them, yet in her deep brown eyes burned a fierce, unwavering fire. A few steps away, Vincent towered over her, his broad frame clad in a crisp black suit that radiated dominance. His sharp blue eyes, once icy with suspicion, now burned with anger and determination. The confirmation from Lucas, the presence of neurotoxin in his wine, cemented one undeniable truth. The Dominion wanted him dead. They sought to erase him, to seize control of Lancaster Group for themselves. But Vincent Lancaster did not fear death. He was a man who had built his empire from the ground up, who had turned threats into opportunities, and who had never allowed anyone to dictate his fate. He took a step forward, his deep voice reverberating through the confined space like a battle cry. "You have information. I have money and power. Let's destroy the Dominion together. They want me dead? Then I'll make them regret picking the wrong enemy." Hannah's breath caught for a brief moment, stunned by his immediate, unwavering resolve. For a decade she had fought alone, fueled by grief and vengeance. She had never imagined finding an ally, let alone one as powerful and relentless as Vincent Lancaster. Her eyes shone, not with joy, but with a flickering hope that burned fiercer than ever. She nodded, her voice steady, yet carrying the weight of 10 years of pain. "I've waited 10 years for this chance." A cold smirk touched Vincent's lips, sharp, calculated, but laced with something deeper. He didn't sit. Instead, he planted both hands on the oak table, leaning in, his gaze a blade cutting straight through her. "Good," he murmured, his voice smooth yet unyielding. "If we're doing this together, I want everything, every detail, every lead. I don't do things halfway, and I don't lose." It wasn't a request, it was a command. Hannah inhaled slowly, reading the intensity in his gaze, the sheer force of a man who never backed down, and for the first time, she found herself admiring that unshakable resolve. Wordlessly, she reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a worn brown leather notebook, the one she had carried for 10 years. It was more than just a collection of notes. It was her lifeline, her obsession, the only thing left of the family she had lost. She placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Her voice dropped, tinged with a quiet pain. This is everything I have. The Dominion's assassination records, their hidden transactions with politicians and corporations, and the name of the man at the top, Reinhard Kessler. A flicker of something unreadable passed through Vincent's gaze. He carefully picked up the notebook, flipping through its pages with the precision of a man who valued every detail. Hannah's handwriting was small but precise, each page meticulously filled with names, dates, and coded accounts. It was a roadmap of corruption, a decade-long trail of bloodshed. The final page bore a name underlined in red ink, Reinhard Kessler, marked with the chilling note, "The man behind the shadows." Vincent let out a low, dark chuckle, not of amusement, but of bitter realization. He shut the notebook with a deliberate snap, lifting his gaze back to Hannah. "You've done what the intelligence agencies and law enforcement failed to do for years." Then his lips curled into a smirk, not out of arrogance, but something colder. "But that ends now. They want a war? I'll give them a nightmare." Hannah let out a slow breath. Her smile was faint, but it carried the weight of sorrow and defiance. "I never had a choice," she murmured. "When my family died, I lost everything. My home, my youth, even myself. Hunting the Dominion is the only thing keeping me alive." Her fingers tightened against her palms, nails pressing into her skin as she fought back the memories clawing at her. Vincent watched her, his expression unreadable. But something in his gaze shifted, a crack in the unshakable fortress he had built around himself. He stepped closer, his imposing figure casting a shadow over her. Then, in an unexpected gesture, he reached out, his long fingers brushing against hers. The touch was brief, yet startlingly warm against her cold skin. Hannah's breath hitched, her brown eyes widening slightly as she met his gaze. His voice was quiet but firm, carrying an unshakable promise. "From now on, you're not doing this alone." Her chest tightened. She had spent a decade relying on no one but herself. But here he was, a man she had saved on impulse, a man she should have had no reason to trust, offering something she hadn't even realized she needed. A partner, not just in vengeance, but in survival. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "They won't stop, Vincent." His smirk returned, colder this time. "Neither will we." For the first time, Hannah let herself believe it. Drenched in the dim light of the forgotten room, two people who had spent their lives in the dark stood face to face. A man who thrived on control and a woman who had lived for revenge. An unlikely alliance forged in blood, fire, and something neither of them dared to name. Chapter 5. Fake Girlfriend and Real Feelings. The private study in Lancaster Estate lay secluded on the upper floor, far removed from the opulence of the grand ballroom below. A crystal desk lamp cast a soft glow over towering ebony bookshelves, filled with legal and financial tomes. Tools Vincent Lancaster used to maintain his iron grip over his empire. In the corner, a small fireplace crackled, emitting a faint warmth against the biting chill of London's winter night. Vincent stood by the large window, his hands tucked into the pockets of his black vest suit, gazing out at the snow-covered oak forest. His tall, imposing frame exuded power and unshakable composure. Hannah Blake sat on a brown leather sofa, her well-worn notebook open on the polished wooden coffee table before her, a silent testament to the fragile alliance they had forged. Vincent turned, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers, filled with both determination and the spark of an idea forming in his mind. "We need to draw the Dominion out," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of a plan already in motion. "They know you saved me, but if they believe you're important to me, more than just a random witness, they will come for you. I suggest we give them what they expect." He paused deliberately, watching her reaction before delivering his next words with quiet amusement. "You'll play the role of my girlfriend." A single brow lifted on Hannah's face. She leaned back into the couch, arms crossing over her chest, the corners of her lips twitching with a teasing smirk. "You think I'm pretty enough to be your girlfriend?" she quipped, her tone playful, but edged with something more, an unspoken challenge. She wasn't the kind of woman typically seen on Vincent Lancaster's arm. No glittering gowns, no diamond-studded accessories. But that wasn't really what she was asking. She was asking if he truly trusted her with a role this dangerous. Vincent took a step closer, his polished shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. He stopped just before the sofa, leaning in slightly so that their eyes met at an equal level. Then, for the first time since they met, he smiled. A real, rare smile. "You're more than enough to make me forget the plan," he murmured, his deep voice laced with something unreadable, something dangerously sincere. It wasn't just an answer, it was an admission. And for the first time in a very long while, Hannah felt her pulse stutter. She let out a small laugh, quickly masking the sudden warmth rising in her chest. Turning her face slightly, she tried to ignore the way her cheeks burned. "All right," she relented, standing up to meet his gaze head-on. "I'll do it. But don't blame me if I ruin your perfect act." Vincent's eyes flickered with a glint of amusement. "I look forward to seeing how you try." 3 days later, at a high-profile charity gala in London, Hannah stepped into the grand ballroom, not as an anonymous investigator, but as Vincent Lancaster's date. She was transformed. A stunning red evening gown hugged her figure, the fabric cascading elegantly down to the floor. The modest uniform that once concealed her presence was now replaced by bold sophistication. Her chestnut brown hair flowed in soft waves, framing her face, while subtle eyeliner accentuated the depth of her brown eyes, turning them into something mesmerizing. Vincent, clad in a tailored black tuxedo, extended his hand as she descended from the sleek black Rolls-Royce. Cameras flashed, murmurs spread, but as her fingers slid into his, a faint spark of electricity pulsed between them. Neither reacted. They had a role to play. The chandeliers inside the gala hall glowed brilliantly, casting golden reflections across the marble floor. Soft symphonies played from a live orchestra, mingling with the hushed conversations of London's elite. Vincent led Hannah through the crowd, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a touch that was both protective and possessive. "You all right?" he murmured as they approached the dance floor. Hannah tilted her head slightly, a teasing glint in her eyes. "I'm fine. But you seem a little tense." Vincent didn't respond with words. Instead, he pulled her into the center of the dance floor. One hand found hers, the other settled at her waist. With effortless grace, he led her into a slow, deliberate waltz. Hannah exhaled softly, surprised at how naturally their movements aligned. "You dance better than I expected," Vincent mused, his breath warm against her temple as they moved in perfect rhythm. Hannah smirked, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "Because you lead well." Their bodies moved in sync, effortlessly navigating the floor. The music swelled around them, yet all she could hear was the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She could feel the warmth of his hand pressing against her lower back, the way his fingers tightened ever so slightly around hers, the way his blue eyes, so often cold and unreadable, now held something different, something softer, something dangerous. The world around them blurred, the murmurs of the crowd, the flashing of cameras, the presence of the Dominion lurking somewhere in the shadows. All of it faded, leaving only the two of them. Vincent tightened his hold, drawing her just a fraction closer, and in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just an act anymore. The realization struck both of them at the same time, reflected in the subtle change in their expressions. Vincent leaned in, his lips barely an inch from her ear, his voice dropping into a husky whisper. "You look more beautiful than I imagined." Hannah inhaled sharply. She turned her face slightly, eyes meeting his, her fingers instinctively tightening around his hand. But she quickly looked away, hiding the way her lips curled into an involuntary smile. Vincent saw it anyway, but he didn't push. Instead, he simply continued leading her across the floor, letting the moment linger just a little longer. The Dominion was watching. Somewhere in the darkness, their enemies lurked. But here, beneath the dazzling chandeliers under the scrutiny of London's elite, Vincent and Hannah danced. No longer just pretending. and for the first time, the carefully constructed walls between them began to crack. Chapter 6. Passion amidst the line of fire. The radiant chandeliers bathed the grand hall of the Windsor Hotel in golden light, illuminating an extravagant charity gala filled with London's most powerful figures in finance and politics. Hannah Blake walked through the crowd with quiet confidence, wrapped in a form-fitting black gown that accentuated her curves without being ostentatious. Her chestnut brown hair cascaded in loose waves, framing her face with an effortless elegance. To anyone watching, she looked like just another successful businesswoman, but only she and Vincent knew the truth. She wasn't here to enjoy the party. She was here hunting for the Dominion. Vincent Lancaster stood beside her, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his sharp features exuding authority and danger in equal measure. There was something about him, the effortless power, the unshakable composure, that made people instinctively keep their distance. Tonight, they played the role of a flawless couple, poised and untouchable. But beneath the glamorous illusion, they were both on edge. Somewhere in this room, their enemies lurked. Hannah lifted a glass of red wine to her lips, her eyes discreetly scanning the room. Everything appeared normal until a sudden, sharp chill crawled down her spine. An instinct, a warning. She turned her head just in time to see. "Get down!" Vincent lunged forward, his arm wrapping around her waist as he yanked her to the ground. A bang! A gunshot ripped through the air. The bullet tore past, grazing Vincent's arm before embedding itself into the wall behind them. Screams erupted across the hall. Glass shattered. Guests scrambled in panic, knocking over champagne flutes and silk-clad tables in their desperation to flee. Hannah found herself pinned beneath Vincent, his weight pressing against her, his heartbeat a frantic rhythm against her own. His strong arms caged her protectively, shielding her from any further harm. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse pounding in her ears. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her eyes darting to his arm, where a thin line of crimson stained his pristine suit sleeve. Vincent didn't even flinch. His grip on her only tightened, his voice rough and unwavering. "I won't let you die." Hannah's breath caught. Something inside her shifted. Of all the things he could have said, amidst the chaos, the danger, why that? Her fingers curled against his chest, gripping the fabric of his suit. Her mind screamed at her to question him, to demand an explanation, but all that came out was a single, fragile whisper. "Why?" For a moment, Vincent said nothing. Then he leaned in, his breath warm against her skin, his voice low and raw. "Because you're the first person I've ever wanted to protect." The world around them disappeared. The screams, the chaos, the distant sirens. None of it mattered anymore. There was only him, only her, and then, she wasn't sure who moved first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was her. But the next thing she knew, his lips crashed against hers. The kiss was nothing gentle. It was a storm. Vincent kissed her with a hunger, a desperation, as if needing to prove to himself that she was still alive, still breathing beneath him. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her impossibly closer, as though afraid she would vanish if he let go. Hannah responded with equal fire. She had spent 10 years consumed by revenge, living in the shadows of grief and rage. But now she felt alive, more alive than she had in a decade. Their lips moved fiercely, claiming, consuming. It wasn't about romance, nor was it about caution. It was survival. It was the fire of two souls who had been alone for too long, finding something neither of them had dared to hope for. The kiss burned, hotter than the danger surrounding them, hotter than the blood seeping from Vincent's wound. And for the first time in her life, Hannah didn't feel lost in the past. She was here, with him, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7. Secrets of the Past and a Promise Under the Moonlight. The distant wail of police sirens echoed through the London streets, blending with the hurried footsteps of Lancaster's security team as they pursued the would-be assassin. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, a figure in a black coat sprinted through the narrow alleyways, each breath visible in the frigid winter air. Vincent Lancaster stood by the ballroom window, his icy blue eyes following the chaos outside. His grip on Hannah's hand was firm, steady, anchoring her amidst the storm. "Find him," he ordered through the earpiece, his deep voice laced with lethal intent. "Alive if possible." Barely 20 minutes later, Lucas returned, his sharp features tense under the grand chandeliers. "He's dead, sir," he reported grimly. "Our men were closing in, but someone got to him first. One bullet to the head. Clean. No ID. No trace." Vincent's grip on Hannah's hand tightened, his jaw clenching as his expression darkened. The Dominion wasn't just hunting them. They were erasing any trail that could lead back to them. He turned to Hannah, his voice firm, but beneath the hardened exterior, there was something else. Something that sounded dangerously close to concern. "We're not safe here. Come with me." Vincent's safe house lay on the outskirts of London, hidden among rows of quiet, unassuming townhouses. The interior was minimalistic, yet comfortable. Wood-paneled walls, a crackling fireplace in the corner, and a large window that overlooked the starry night sky. Silver moonlight poured through the glass, casting soft shadows across the wooden floor, washing away some of the tension lingering between them. Hannah sat curled up on a cream-colored leather sofa, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea Vincent had made for her. The warmth seeped into her fingers, chasing away the last traces of cold. She had shed the striking red gown from earlier, now dressed in an oversized sweater that belonged to Vincent. The faint scent of sandalwood clung to the fabric, comforting in a way she didn't expect. Vincent, now rid of his tuxedo jacket, leaned against the fireplace. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms still carrying the tension of the night. He had been watching her, not speaking, just watching. Finally, his deep voice broke the silence. "For 10 years, what kept you going?" It wasn't mere curiosity, it was something deeper, a desire to understand her. Hannah exhaled shakily, placing the teacup down. Her hands trembled slightly as the memories surged, memories she had buried, yet never outrun. "I hid in a closet," she whispered. "I heard my mother beg. It didn't matter. They killed her anyway." Her breath hitched, her voice barely audible now. "I was the only one left." Vincent said nothing, allowing her to speak at her own pace. Her eyes darkened as she stared at the floor, lost in the nightmare of her past. "It was a rainy night. My father was an investigative journalist. He uncovered too much about the Dominion, so they came for him. They came for all of us." She swallowed, blinking away the sting of tears. "I heard my mother scream, my brother crying. Then, gunshots. Silence." Her fingers clenched into her lap. "I hid in the closet, held my breath, pretended I was already dead while they searched the house. And when it was over, all that was left was me. Just me, in the ruins of what used to be my home." Her voice wavered, but her resolve did not. "For 10 years, I lived for one thing: revenge." A long silence stretched between them. Vincent's gaze never left her, his expression unreadable, but something in his eyes shifted, something raw. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as an ally, not as a woman who had saved his life, but as someone who had survived the kind of pain he couldn't begin to fathom. Vincent slowly pushed away from the fireplace. Then, without a word, he reached for her hand. His long fingers wove through hers, firm yet careful, as if anchoring her back to the present. "I live to control everything around me," he murmured, his voice quiet but unwavering. "But I've never met someone stronger than you." Hannah looked up, startled by the sincerity in his tone. There was no pity in his eyes, no empty sympathy, only understanding. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel alone in her grief, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she let his warmth seep into her frozen skin, let herself believe, if only for this moment, that she wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Vincent stood, gently tugging her with him, leading her toward the balcony where the moon cast its silver glow over the sleeping city. The cold air bit at her exposed skin, but standing beside him, she barely felt it. He turned to her, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight as he slowly lifted her hand. Then, without hesitation, he pressed a kiss against her knuckles. A soft, deliberate promise. His lips were warm against her skin, yet the gesture sent a shiver down her spine. Not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. "I would give you the world," he murmured, his voice low and resolute, "if it meant you'd never be alone again." It wasn't a vow of love. It was something stronger, a promise, that he would stand beside her in this war, that he would fight her demons as if they were his own. Hannah let out a slow breath, resting her forehead lightly against his shoulder, allowing herself, just for tonight, to lean on someone else. Vincent's arm wrapped around her, holding her there, not as a lover, but as something deeper, something unspoken. Two souls, scarred but unbroken, standing together against the darkness of their pasts. And under the silver glow of the London moon, that silent promise bound them closer than any words ever could. Chapter 8. The Trap and a Terrifying Truth. Vincent had gathered substantial evidence against the Dominion, records of illicit transactions, audio recordings, and damning photographs. Yet it wasn't enough. What he had was only a fragment of the larger puzzle. Enough to cause pressure, but not enough to deliver the fatal blow. The Dominion was like a beast lurking in the shadows, layers of impenetrable armor shielding its true form. And Vincent knew, one wrong move, one misstep, and everything they had built would collapse. And worse, Hannah, the woman he now felt an unshakable responsibility to protect, would be swallowed by the darkness once again. The Dominion had been watching them, tracking their every move, and the moment they recognized Hannah as Vincent's weakness, they set their trap. A cold wind howled through the narrow streets of London, weaving between towering buildings bathed in neon lights. The city never truly slept, yet in the heart of its endless motion, a predator lurked unseen. Hannah Blake sat curled in the shadows of the Bloomsbury Public Library, only a few blocks from Lancaster Estate. The dim blue glow of her laptop screen flickered against her face, reflecting in her deep brown eyes which burned with fierce determination. After the attempted assassination at the charity gala, she knew the Dominion would strike again, but this time she had the upper hand. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, decrypting layers of financial data she had infiltrated days ago. Line after line of encrypted transactions unraveled before her eyes. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Swiss bank accounts under the name of a shell corporation. And at the center of it all, Reinhard Kessler. Hannah's heart pounded as realization struck. This was it, the leverage they needed. She snatched her phone and typed out a quick message to Vincent. "I found their biggest transaction yet. Meet me at Bloomsbury Library, 10 p.m. She hit send, but she never saw the shadow lurking among the towering bookshelves. She never sensed the hunter waiting for his moment, until it was too late. A dark figure lunged from the shelves, moving with deadly precision. Hannah spun around. Too late. A rough hand clamped over her mouth, another arm locked around her throat. She thrashed, nails digging into her attacker's skin, but a sharp prick at her neck made her freeze. A needle. Cold liquid seeped into her veins. Her vision blurred. Her limbs weakened. No. With the last of her strength, she fumbled for her phone, blindly typing out a message before it slipped from her grasp, falling to the wooden floor. "Don't come. I'm not worth dying for." Darkness consumed her. Vincent was in his study at Lancaster Estate, his sharp blue eyes glued to a large computer screen, tracking his security team's latest surveillance efforts. He had increased Hannah's protection after the gala attack, but she still insisted on working alone, pursuing leads, breaking into encrypted networks. He admired her tenacity, but something gnawed at him, a gut-wrenching instinct. His phone vibrated, a message from Hannah. "I found their biggest transaction yet. Meet me at Bloomsbury Library, 10 p.m. Vincent smirked slightly. "That's my girl." Then a second message. "Don't come. I'm not worth dying for." His smirk vanished. His breath caught in his throat. Something was wrong. Vincent immediately dialed her number. No answer. A cold, unfamiliar sensation gripped his chest. He slammed his fist onto the desk. "Lucas!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the vast study. Lucas burst into the room, alert. "Sir?" Vincent's voice was razor sharp. "Trace Hannah's phone. Now!" Lucas typed furiously on his laptop, but after mere seconds, his face paled. "Her phone was last pinged at the library, but the signal just went dark. There's no movement." Vincent didn't hesitate. He bolted out of the room. "Get the car. We're going now." His voice thundered through the halls of Lancaster Estate as security teams scrambled into action. The moment Vincent slid into the back seat of his armored SUV, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. His mind raced. And for the first time in his life, he felt fear. Not for himself, for her. When they arrived at the library, the sight before him made his blood run cold. The rear exit door stood ajar. Snow-covered footprints scattered in erratic patterns. And lying abandoned on the floor, Hannah's phone. The screen still illuminated with her final message. Vincent knelt down, fingers trembling as he picked it up. His throat tightened. His chest ached in a way he didn't understand. He turned to his men, his voice like the growl of a wounded beast. "Find her. Now!" Lucas hesitated for only a second before saying carefully, "We need a plan, sir." "If we move recklessly—" Vincent snapped. He shoved Lucas back, eyes blazing with something raw, something no one had ever seen in him before. "A plan?" he roared. "She could be dying while we stand here." Lucas remained silent. Vincent ran a shaking hand through his hair, his breaths uneven. His chest hurt. This wasn't just another mission. This wasn't about strategy. This was Hannah, and he would burn this city to the ground if it meant bringing her back. His voice dropped to a whisper, rough with something dangerously close to desperation. "She's all I have." The words barely left his lips, but they landed with the force of a bomb. For years, Vincent Lancaster had lived with absolute control. He manipulated, dictated, dominated. But Hannah had undone him, and now without her, he was unraveling. Vincent clenched his jaw, rising to his feet. His blue eyes gleamed with the promise of vengeance. "I will find you," he murmured, gripping her phone like a lifeline. "Even if it kills me." Under the cold, merciless London sky, Vincent Lancaster, once untouchable, once unshakable, felt something for the first time in his life: terror. And for the first time in 10 years, Hannah Blake's life was no longer hers alone. Because now she was his, and he would destroy anyone who dared take her away from him. Chapter 9. Reinhardt recognizes Hannah. The Dominion's secret headquarters was not hidden in Switzerland, as many believed. It lay concealed within an aging, ivy-covered building, just a few streets away from Bloomsbury Library. Outside, London's frigid night air was laced with a fine mist of rain, turning the pavement slick beneath the dim glow of streetlights. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with dampness, the acrid scent of gunpowder lingering in the air. Vincent Lancaster had not needed to search for Hannah. The Dominion had made it easy for him. A call came through, an unregistered number. Then Reinhardt Kessler's voice, cold and venomous, crackled through the speaker. "Lancaster, if you want to save the girl, come alone to the address I'll send. No tricks, or she dies before you even step through the door." A text followed immediately after. A precise location, only minutes from the library. Vincent barely registered Lucas's protest as he leaped from the car. No security team, no backup, only him. He stormed into the building, his steps echoing through the decrepit hallways. The gun in his hand was steady, his breath controlled, but the rage boiling in his veins was anything but. "Hannah!" he roared, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "I'm here!" His booted foot slammed against a rotting wooden door, sending it flying open. And there she was, Hannah Blake, tied to a wooden chair, wrists and ankles bound so tightly that the rope had cut into her skin. Blood trickled from the abrasions, staining her pale skin. Her hair was disheveled, damp from sweat, and her complexion was ghostly white. But her eyes, those fierce brown eyes, blazed with defiance. And standing before her was Reinhardt Kessler, the man at the top of the Dominion, tall, imposing, with neatly slicked back silver hair and sharp gray eyes as cold as steel. He wore an immaculate gray suit, a polished black cane resting in his grip. A man who exuded power, cruelty, and absolute control. He observed Vincent with calculated amusement before turning his gaze back to Hannah. And then, recognition. It flickered across his features like a lightning strike. A slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. Then laughter. A deep, hollow sound that echoed through the room like a death knell. "Now I remember you." Reinhardt mused, shaking his head in amusement. You're the girl from that house, the journalist brat, the one who survived the massacre 10 years ago. Vincent's grip on his gun tightened, but Reinhardt ignored him. He stepped closer to Hannah, tapping his cane against the floor in a rhythmic, almost taunting manner. Ah, now everything makes sense. His eyes gleamed with a twisted delight. You're the one who ruined my little assassination attempt at Lancaster's estate. That foolish kiss. You saved him. Vincent's entire body stiffened at Reinhardt's words, but Hannah, bound, bruised, exhausted, tilted her chin up. You made me. Her voice was steady, sharp as a blade. Now face me. Reinhardt chuckled, tilting his head as if she were some amusing anomaly. Your father begged for his life, he taunted, voice dripping with mockery. He knelt at my feet, pleaded for his family. Do you think you're stronger than him? Hannah's hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not of sorrow. They were of rage. I am stronger. She lifted her gaze to Vincent, her voice unwavering. Because I have him. Vincent stepped forward, rage crackling beneath his icy exterior. And in that moment, Reinhard Kessler lifted his gun. You should have stayed dead, Lancaster. A gunshot tore through the air. Hannah, get down, Vincent bellowed. But she had already moved. With the last of her strength, Hannah twisted, wrenching herself free enough to tip the chair. Her body lurched forward, and the bullet meant for Vincent slammed into her chest. Blood bloomed against the fabric of her sweater. Her body hit the cold, unforgiving floor. No! Vincent's roar shattered the air as he lunged toward her. His instincts took over. His gun snapped up, finger on the trigger. A second shot rang out. Reinhardt staggered back, blood seeping through his pristine suit where Vincent's bullet had torn through his shoulder. The older man let out a low growl of pain, clutching the wound, but his smirk never wavered. Then, the sound of sirens, rushed footsteps. Freeze! Drop your weapon! The room was suddenly flooded with police and Vincent's private security, but Reinhardt was already on the move. In one swift motion, he tossed his gun aside as a distraction and darted toward the rear exit. Lucas shouted, leading a team in pursuit, but Reinhardt's figure disappeared into the labyrinthine alleyways of London. Vincent didn't care. Didn't care about the Dominion. Didn't care about Reinhardt Kessler escaping. Because Hannah was on the floor, blood pooling beneath her, her breath shallow and fading. He fell to his knees beside her, pressing his hands against her wound in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. Her eyes fluttered open. And when she looked at him, it wasn't with fear, it was with acceptance. A weak smile ghosted her lips. Vincent, her voice was barely a whisper. You're safe. That's enough. His breath caught. No, damn it, Hannah. Don't do this. Her fingers trembled as she reached up, brushing against his cheek. The files. My laptop. Give them to the police. Her head slumped against his chest. Number, Hannah, stay with me. The paramedics rushed in, their voices shouting commands Vincent barely processed. He was forced to let go as they lifted her onto a stretcher, pressing gauze to her wound, strapping an oxygen mask over her face. Vincent staggered to his feet, his hands drenched in her blood, his breath ragged, his soul burning. Lucas appeared beside him, gripping his shoulder. Sir, we need to go. Now. Vincent barely heard him. His eyes were locked onto Hannah as she was wheeled into the ambulance. He moved instinctively, climbing in after her. He would not leave her alone. The doors slammed shut, the sirens wailed, and as the ambulance tore through the London streets, Vincent gripped her hand tightly, his voice barely above a whisper. Stay with me, Hannah. I don't care what it takes. Just stay. And as the city blurred past, a fire ignited in his veins. Reinhardt had taken everything from her. Now, Vincent would take everything from him, even if it meant burning the entire Dominion to the ground. Chapter 10, Victory and Loss. The ambulance tore through the rain-soaked streets of London, its sirens wailing into the cold night. Inside the cramped space, paramedics worked frantically around Hannah. A doctor performed relentless chest compressions, sweat beading on his forehead, while a nurse secured an oxygen mask over Hannah's pale face. Her pulse is weak. Prepare the defibrillator. The machine beeped sporadically, signaling how close she was to slipping away. Vincent sat beside her, gripping her blood-stained hand as though sheer willpower could tether her to life. "Hannah, stay with me." His voice was hoarse, raw with desperation. "You will live. I won't let you go." By the time they reached the hospital, Hannah was barely clinging on. She was rushed into surgery, a flurry of medical personnel surrounding her. "She's lost too much blood. Get me O negative now." Vincent tried to follow, but was stopped at the door. His fists pounded against the glass. "Save her!" he roared. Then nothing. Hours passed. Vincent sat motionless in the sterile hallway, hands stained with dried blood. Her blood. The sounds of the hospital faded into the background as he stared into the abyss of his thoughts. He had faced death before. He had lost people. He had accepted that loss was inevitable. But not her. When the surgeon finally emerged, pulling off his mask with a weary sigh, Vincent felt his entire world tilt on its axis. "She made it," the doctor said. "The bullet missed her heart, but she lost a dangerous amount of blood. We managed to stabilize her. She'll need time, but she's going to live." Vincent nearly collapsed from the weight of relief crashing over him. He didn't care about dignity, didn't care that his hands were shaking as he pushed past the doctor and into the recovery room. There on the hospital bed lay Hannah, fragile, pale, but alive. He sank to his knees beside her, took her cold hand in his and pressed his forehead against it. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not leaving me." 1 month later. Sunlight filtered through the curtains of Vincent's private residence, a secure, hidden sanctuary far from the chaos of the past. Hannah sat curled on the leather couch, a steaming cup of tea cradled between her hands. Her complexion had regained warmth, and though a faint scar remained where the bullet had struck, her eyes no longer carried the weight of relentless vengeance. She was healing. Vincent entered the room, placing another cup of tea beside her. "How are you feeling?" She looked up, offering him a small but genuine smile. "Better. Stronger." She hesitated before adding, "Because of you." He sat beside her, reaching for her hand, his touch cautious, reverent. "You saved me first." For a long moment, they simply sat in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. Then Vincent exhaled slowly, as if steeling himself, before shifting to kneel before her. Hannah's breath caught as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a silver ring gleamed under the morning light. Simple, elegant, timeless. Her heart pounded. "Vincent, let me finish," he said softly, his blue eyes holding hers with unwavering certainty. "I can't promise you the world, Hannah, but I can promise you mine." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Will you marry me?" Hannah choked out a laugh, overwhelmed. There was no hesitation. "Yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. And he wouldn't. Not now, not ever. The end of the Dominion. As Hannah healed, Vincent and Lucas worked with authorities, ensuring every last piece of evidence was delivered. The Dominion's empire crumbled. Reinhard Kessler was captured in Manchester and sentenced to life in prison alongside his remaining operatives. Their crimes, money laundering, assassinations, global criminal conspiracies, were laid bare before the world. And at the center of it all, Hannah Blake stood as living proof that justice, though long overdue, was possible. During the trial, she learned the full truth. Her father had uncovered the Dominion's political corruption. Reinhard had ordered the hit on her family to silence him. And she, the girl who was meant to die that night, had lived to destroy them. Vincent sat beside her as the verdict was read. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, only exhaled the breath she had been holding for 10 years. "It's over," he murmured. She turned to him, her fingers brushing against his. "I can finally let go." A new beginning. On a crisp spring morning, beneath the clear London sky, they exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony. No grand ballrooms, no extravagant guest lists, just them. Vincent, the man who once controlled everything, now standing before the only woman who had ever made him lose control. Hannah, the woman who had lived a decade for revenge, now choosing love instead. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Vincent whispered against her lips, "You're my forever." And for the first time in her life, Hannah truly believed in something more than vengeance. She believed in them because they had survived, and together they would build something beautiful from the ruins of the past. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.